Hey everyone, this is an update to my video that I made yesterday about the challenges that China's currently facing with the events going on. To kind of balance between either facing the issue of public unrest and dissatisfaction with the current COVID policies, or really have the issue that maybe the medical system might be flowing over and there is a spike in deaths going on due to the fact that China might open too quickly. So that's basically the big issue currently for Beijing, and there are new developments. For example, media takes like this. So that one is on Twitter by Jim Bianco, an American crypto guy. So as you can see, these threads that are emerging right now, they are quite sensationalist. Of course, we have all of those pictures going on and comparing it to, for example, Tiananmen Square, what's happening with the protests. And as you know, I'm covering these events on the channel here and try to give you my personal opinion, take it as a second opinion, just how I personally see things, and then, decide for yourself where you think the truth is. And basically, I want to make a couple of points here around the current events that are going on, and maybe just using my timeline here as well. Please go and follow me on Twitter. That is actually _mm85. So I'm publishing also my views there from time to time. Sometimes also some not so serious posts as well. So these are my posts from yesterday, for example, also posting here about this situation of demonstrations happening in Shanghai. So, previously we had events at Foxconn, so the factory that's producing iPhones for Apple, and then also social unrest around the Urumqi event, a fire where 10 people or more possibly unfortunately died due to the situation that they have been in a lockdown situation. And as well, we have occasionally some protests in other areas like in Guangzhou, where people are facing lockdowns currently. So some of the events are directly related to actual COVID policies, and some of them are, as I've outlined, also a serious event around mismanagement, for example, with the Foxconn situation and some other workers' issues, as these factories are currently sometimes in closed loop production. But so these events here in Shanghai show, there's currently no lockdown in Shanghai. Those people are not affected too much by those policies. But it's showing that, there's a broadening out of this movement right now in China in a way that more people that are not directly currently affected by these events are actually going onto the street and, showing their support for example, Urumqi. And of course, these are more well-educated, more affluent people, more wealthy people going onto the streets. Some of them surely have also some foreign influence, so they have been studying, they've studied overseas. And so basically it is just showing, that this is developing a little bit of a larger scale here. However, what I would also point out here is that these events have been quite peaceful in a way. Yes, some people have been arrested in Shanghai yesterday, but let's also put this into context. China is a very, very big country, so if there is a protest in Shanghai or Beijing, this is the similar distance between, let's say, Berlin and Lisbon in Europe. And during our times of COVID lockdowns and measurements, we had large-scale protests also all over Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the US, and some of them, frankly, haven't been covered as much in the mass media, to be honest. And these protests have been on a much, much larger scale than what we are currently seeing in China. However, what I also pointed out yesterday is that these sort of events are kind of unusual for China. Usually you don't go out and protest like this on the streets, although there have always been protests in China as well. But, seeing such a larger movement is quite unusual, especially in the social media. But I've also pointed out yesterday already that this ultimately also may help the government in a way of making this disruption that COVID policies are showing more public and viewable. And the interesting fact here is, for example, if I look at some of the stuff that's currently posted on my WeChat timeline, so by Chinese, some of them things are getting censored or removed, and that's quite usual in China. For example, this post here, it's basically, the quote, the automatic translation here is: the National Health Commission is requested to amend the announcement number 1 of 2020 immediately to remove the disease caused by Omicron from the category B infectious disease. So that's an article that was posted yesterday and was freely accessible for quite some time, so I had no issues of viewing that. But it's basically, the demand here is that they basically want to remove the legal basis for epidemic prevention work. So that would be similar to, for example, the US or Europe declaring that COVID is not longer a national health emergency. So this is what the author of this post is demanding here. And if you look at today, basically all you see is this. So this is an example of a post that has been removed because it was too straightforward, I would say, or too direct in the demands that they were making here. But again, today I open my WeChat and there are interesting things on my timeline again. For example, here, articles, and that was a major theme today about the PCR test and who's earning money with that. So a couple of different articles here disclosing who has been founded, such kind of companies that are running the PCR tests. And as you know, they are mass testing the cities, and some people are making very, very good money with this kind of testing. And the fact that those articles are staying online and, kind of making the public more sensitive to the economic effects of this pandemic, and also that this is good business for some people, is, I think, quite remarkable to see. And so far these articles are staying online, and my suspicion here is that this is maybe part of a more broad information campaign. I'm not saying that this is kind of sponsored by government, but there is more awareness now created online about the disruption that COVID policies are costing to the economy. And this one is also very remarkable. So this is auto-translate again, but it's basically around the question, should we morally or ethically judge that in the case of an opening, there are millions of people going to die, right? This is one of the biggest arguments for zero-COVID policies in China. Basically, if China would reopen at this point in time, because China is such a big country, and because it would possibly overwhelm the system, therefore millions of people would die, right? And this article shared on WeChat again is basically making the point that, starting to comparing Omicron to the flu, highlighting what China has done in the past in order to prevent deaths, and how this was a morally high standard and very good for the whole country. But now kind of saying like, Omicron is kind of something new. It's not as severe anymore. And at some point in time, a loss of lives might be inevitable or cannot be prevented. So it did close with the paragraph here: the people did not oppose epidemic prevention from the beginning. So saying, there is support for these policies, but in the past they supported it. People have not changed, but what has changed is the virus. So interesting definition here. Please give them some choices and don't kidnap them with moral slogans like that 1 million and do you have old people. So basically this is some of the first voices that I'm seeing out there, freely accessible and shared on WeChat, to kind of make a counter argument here to this life's first policy, if you will, right? Because it's in China, it's been always about this idea of preventing any death by the coronavirus if possible. And frankly, this is still the views of the majority of the Chinese and the government, because the Chinese just think like this. What happened in Europe and in America is certainly not acceptable, with the millions of deaths and overwhelmed situation in hospitals. And so, of course, what's going on in China right now is very challenging in terms of these protests on the street, and this might be a real challenge to the government, how they're actually dealing with that, because the initial buying or legitimacy of the government's actions have always been about saving lives and preventing and basically protecting the people. But at some point right now, as there is a shift obviously in terms of what people value, so meaning still being able to go out, still having ways of going to work and earning money and have a not disrupted life. This is just a incremental slow progress that is now being kind of supercharged here, with more of such information being found online, and certainly also with such footage being available everywhere. Of course, the Chinese know what's going on and they see it. And so this is now starting to open a progress for setting a new narrative, which ultimately could even save the face for the government for an exit strategy at some point in time. I'm not saying that this is happening immediately and that this is kind of the next thing to happen. I think we rather actually see a doubling down now. For example, in Shanghai, now they've reduced the PCR test time that is valid to go out from 72 hours to 48 hours. So the big theme here is still the prevention of the spread of the virus. But just the fact that the dissatisfaction is now publicly available and can be viewed by everyone, and such a more educational article is kind of paving the way for a pivot at some point in time, because if the public opinion switches from, let's say, the Omicron situation is serious, we need your protection, to we want to live our lives and want to go out, then it kind of backs the government in their actions if they say they will open up, because then suddenly the responsibility for what's going to happen afterwards is not with the government anymore. If they would do it now, then the deaths would be blamed on the government. But in the future, if there is more backing by people publicly that they say they want a change, then of course nobody can blame the government if that's really happening afterwards. So I think that's kind of the rationale behind that we are seeing currently playing out. Still very, very difficult situation there, and not sure how this is going to play out exactly. So my broad takeaway here is that some of this reporting might be overly sensational at some point in time. Currently, the protests seem to be in a more orderly manner, and I think it actually benefits Beijing in the end by allowing such kind of footage to emerge for something that might be a plan in the future to have their legitimacy based in a new narrative. Whether this turns out to be true, we'll see in a few weeks, I guess, or months. I don't know how long this process lasts of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, but certainly that's what's happening on the ground right now. Let me know your views about that in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.